So for justice, a website called Justice for Kurt also has a lot of compelling information. One of the things that came out was the police did not process the gun for fingerprints until a month after his demise. The police also classified this as a suicide on the same day that they discovered the body, which apparently is not normal police process and is looked at with a lot of questions. That being said, when they did process the gun, they did not find any legible fingerprints on it. And you're assuming if Kurt purchased this gun, he actually went and purchased it with a friend of his. I've got a picture of his friend here. This is his friend, Dylan Carlson. So the gun was bought in Dylan's name. But if Kurt owned and handled this rifle, I'm pretty sure that his fingerprints should be on it, even though he only handled it for a matter of days. What people think is that potentially the gun was wiped down, and that's why the prints are smudged and they can't get a clean lift off of that. Worth noting, the way the gun was found laying on his chest, his hand was literally gripped on the rifle, and the trigger is basically facing upside down, and it is an auto-loading shotgun. So as soon as the first shot was fired, it automatically ejected the shell casing and loaded up the next charge. And some people question the direction of the shell casing, that it is on the left of Kurt, and the way the gun is facing, it should be to the right. The police have looked into that, and their determination is that the gun was actually right side up when he shot himself, and when he fell back, the gun probably twisted and fell upside down, though there are experts that say that is impossible. One theory I have that I haven't heard anyone come up with is if he might have still had the gun potentially upside down, but his knee was up in a position so that when he shot himself, the casing would have actually bounced off his knee and then fallen off to his left. But I haven't seen anyone review that take on it. This is Michael DeWitt, also known as Callie, and he was a live-in babysitter for Francis Bean, and a lot of people seem to suggest that he might have had something to do with the murder, if not conducting it himself. He was at the home around the time of all this happening. He left a letter on the stairs, a letter that the private investigator really feels like was written very clunky and is not believable to him. As a matter of fact, the private investigator is pretty sure that the letter was written for the private investigator to find. But from what I've seen, there is no real evidence to tie Callie to the actual crime. It would have been something if they found his fingerprints on the gun or on the shell casing or something along those lines. But it's hard to know if the police were really processing that as a potential homicide scene. They had ruled it a suicide so early on, and even in new videos that I'm seeing where they're talking about the case, they have a very singular view of the events here. And I'm not seeing evidence to suggest that they've even tested that theory by looking for evidence that might not support the suicide theory. So it's pretty tough to know for sure. So back on Cobain case, there is a great link here about the timeline of events. And we can see here, yeah, March 26th is when Courtney left Seattle. March 30th is when Kurt and his best friend Dylan went and purchased the shotgun. So for her to have that concern about the shotgun and to be as immediate with it, I'm questioning a little. April 1st, well, here's the other weird thing about this timeline. So he goes and buys a shotgun. He's saying he's buying a shotgun because there was a recent break-in attempt at the house, and he used to have guns, but they were confiscated, I guess, by the police. That's also part of the reason why he's having his friend buy it in his name. But basically, he goes and buys this gun, and then later that day, he's leaving for a rehab center in Marina del Rey, California. That's on March 30th. On April 1st, Courtney tries to call that rehab center like 13 times. And I don't know if they're fictionalizing it for the film, but in the film, it seems like she is using different stories every time she calls. She's saying she's different people trying to get through to him. April let's see, April 3rd is when she contacts the private agent or the private investigator. And Kurt actually arrived back in Seattle early Saturday morning, April 2nd, which to me says that he was apparently only in rehab for maybe a day and a half, 2 days tops. So you have to wonder, you know, for most people that are doing a rehab stint, I don't think 2 days is really sufficient to get a whole lot done. I know some people might attempt to go through a rehab process and are not going to stick with it, so they kind of bail out, and that's what it feels like is happening here. Does that support one theory or the other? I'm really not sure. It definitely could lend more credence to the suicide theory, particularly if he wasn't feeling great about not being able to quit his addiction. These are pictures. This is a picture of the type of shotgun used, and originally I was curious because I was thinking it might have been a pump action shotgun, and if that was the case, how the heck did the cartridge get expelled? If he would have shot himself, that would have been it. It would have taken another pump for the cartridge to kick out. But I learned the specific model, I believe it's a Remington M11, and that is an auto-loading rifle. Basically, after the first one is in the chamber, the energy from the shot blast does all of the mechanics to eject the cartridge and load up the next one. So that is all perfectly feasible. One of the great things on CobainCase.com is Tom Grant has put together what essentially looks like an ebook that he might have been selling for a while, but you can now get for free from there. And it is, I think it's over 137 pages. It includes a ton of documentation as well as his thoughts. It basically seems like his personal overall case file on this whole matter. So there's a lot to dig into here. There's copies of the suicide note in there as well as a transcript of the suicide note. We're going to look at those a little bit later from a different source. But he does have whatever few pieces of the police reports that he's been able to get in here. So I'm just going to read from one of these. On top of this dirt pile is a note written in red ink and stuck into the dirt pile with a red pen. This is a suicide note directed to Courtney and blank and signed Kurt Cobain. I believe it's Francis that has been omitted there. As you can see from this statement, there is a clear assumption right off the bat that this is a suicide note. As a matter of fact, everything about this case, when people first come into the scene, there is a very clear assumption on everyone's part that this is a suicide. It looks like a suicide. You have a note, you have a new shotgun, you have the shotgun shells at his feet. There is a can of root beer 3/4 full with him, a heroin kit. Although it is worth noting, all the heroin items seem to be put away nicely in the kit. It's not like, you know, sometimes on that footage I was talking about where you watch heroin addicts, sometimes they'll shoot up and they'll just leave the needle literally in them while the high hits them. Apparently, according to the official story, Kurt shot up, took the needles out, put the caps back on, put everything back in the box, which is a little bit questionable. This is an image of the supposed suicide note. So you can see it's freehand written, so it's pretty hard to read all of it. So I've also found a transcript, but what is worth looking at here are these lines from here down and how different they are in terms of writing compared to up here. Just the way that the sentences are, you can see he starts on the lower left, he ends on the upper right. This has like a wavy form into it and then actually starts ending really sharply. He ends to the upper right in these sentences, and down here it starts tilting this way. Outside of that, these letters, they're not even near the same size. It looks to me like this could have very easily been written by someone else. People assume it's Courtney, and we're going to look at a piece of evidence why, but I could also assume that it could have been possibly Callie if he was the one that was indeed on site and pulling off this murder, if he was indeed involved in that. I'm just going to read the last paragraph of the top section, which check it out below, but if you read it, honestly, the letter feels like a letter to his fans, like I explained before, and then there's this weird addendum at the bottom, and I just want to see if you feel it as well. Thank you all from the pit in my burning, nauseous stomach for your letters and concern during the past years. I'm too much of an erratic, moody baby. I don't have the passion anymore, and so remember, it's better to burn out than to fade away. Peace, love, empathy, Kurt Cobain. Now, to me, it feels like that's an end to the letter, but it actually goes on. Francis and Courtney, I'll be at your altar. Please keep going, Courtney, for Francis, for her life, which will be so much happier without me. I love you, I love you. So, if you read the full context of the top portion of the letter, it is very clear he's talking to fans. He's talking about his creative process and his overall happiness with his inability to feel creative anymore. He basically feels like he doesn't have it for music anymore, and he doesn't want to go and fake it in live performance after live performance. Then he ends it, peace, love, empathy, Kurt Cobain. There is literally an ending to that letter, an ending to all of the thoughts that are going on above it. Then in that wacky text I showed you before, big blocky letters, is this supposed twist that all of a sudden turns this into a suicide note. And that is highly debated. I myself feel the debate within me on that. I don't want to believe that those last few sentences were written by Kurt. And it's very easy for me not to believe that, seeing the way that they were written. I guess you could theorize that if he had shot up and he was writing the end of the letter, that maybe he was losing his motor skills, or if he was severely depressed and he was getting emotional, that maybe he was crying while he wrote the end and his motor skills were getting sloppy. I mean, there's definitely ways that I could look at it and try to justify it, but it feels like I have to work pretty hard to justify something that should be pretty easily understood and comprehended. Now, one of the main reasons why so many people think that it might be Courtney that wrote this is this document here. And this document actually came from their entertainment attorney. Essentially, Courtney went to visit her, left a backpack behind, and it was there at the house for a matter of days, and the attorney looked into the backpack and found a few things that she thought was interesting and brought them to Tom, the private investigator's attention. This is one of the things that was found. And what you can see is essentially someone trying to, it looks like they're trying to mimic a writing style. They're doing letters of the alphabet over and over and over. And I've seen a video where these letters were taken and used to form the same sentences as the bottom 4 sentences on the suicide note. And it's a pretty close match. There's a lot that looks pretty convincing when you take this as a font and retype out that message. So it's definitely looking kind of strange. That being said, they did on the 20th anniversary, it looks like the Seattle PD did a little footwork and looked at the case again. They had a cold case investigator re-review it. I'm going to have the link for the video down below. I don't really want to play it, but I've watched the whole thing, and once again, it's just this sense of them coming from an already understood viewpoint and then just trying to support their information. One of the things that did occur was apparently there was 2 rolls of 36mm film that were used to photograph the crime site, and they never developed those prints, which the private investigator thought was highly suspicious. According to this detective's story, that was because there was also Polaroid pictures that were taken, and the 36mm were basically just a backup to the Polaroids. Now, I don't know if you guys remember Polaroid cameras. They're not quite as popular now as they used to be, but the fidelity on a Polaroid camera is not great. They are extremely grainy. You can't really see nearly the amount of detail that you can on a 36mm print, particularly if you process that print in any way. So, but they did process the film. That being said, they've released I think like 2 of the pictures. They haven't released the pictures for public review or for outside consideration. And they're saying that, well, basically we don't have a reason to because we're not convinced that anything's going on here. Yeah, but you're still not taking the outside opinion of others, experts in the field that might be able to look at that information and get new details that you can't see in it. So there's still this angle where the Seattle PD doesn't seem to really want to allow public access to this info. Even his autopsy report has not been released, which I guess for Seattle is legally appropriate, but I can tell you in other cases I've reviewed for Los Angeles and for Georgia, the autopsy reports are public information. They're pretty easily accessible. For some reason, seems like it's different in this jurisdiction. That being said, I did find one piece of compelling information from Detective Mike Szysinski. That's the man that's in this interview. As part of his review of the evidence, inside the bag of shotgun shells SPD found at Cobain's side 20 years ago, Detective Szysinski writes, "I recovered a sales receipt for $6.95, which was dated 4/2/94. On the box of 20 gauge ammunition is a price sticker for $6.95 from Seattle Guns. The sales receipt had not been previously disclosed by the SPD." So if we add that into the timeline we talked about before, it now seems that Kurt bought the gun on March 30th, went to rehab, was there for 2 days, flew back from rehab, went to the gun store again just to buy ammo, brought the ammo home, and at some point was killed. Now, a part of this that doesn't hold together for me is there is no verification that he's the one that bought the ammo. It could be that someone else that was living at his home, which we know that there was someone else, bought the ammo. They've tried to verify it because apparently someone called a taxi to that house and took the taxi to close to the ammo store. But I don't see anything that makes that a clear identification of Kurt Cobain, and there doesn't appear to be any information from the store about selling ammo specifically to Kurt Cobain, where I think when there was the gun purchase, it was identified that he was Kurt Cobain. So theoretically, could this have been could the scene have been staged, I think is really the question. And with the, once again, closed off access to the police files, with them not sharing the new photographs or the new exposures of the photographs they have, it's very hard to make a call on that. We know that we have potential motive. We know that we have Courtney acting extremely odd and definitely pulling strings. This is someone that is used to manipulating the media. She makes some comments that seem kind of spiteful about Kurt's success and the fact that her success doesn't seem to have been of the same quality. We have another person that says that they were offered money to kill Kurt Cobain and they pass a lie detector test. So in light of all the other pieces of evidence around this, it's really hard for me personally to come to a firm conclusion one way or the other. Based on the info from the police, I can understand why they see it as a straight up suicide scene. There's not a lot of physical evidence. Even the private investigator, Tom, I've been reviewing his stuff, and admittedly I still have to go through all of his information. But when it comes to physical evidence found on the scene, I'm not seeing enough physical evidence to really implicate that there was anyone else in the room with him at the time that he killed himself. And I believe that that is a big part of the missing piece here. There needs to be some evidence that someone else was there or someone else had done something. Another set of prints was found. And that's tough. I mean, how do you do that without having access to the police materials? I really have no idea. The room that he killed himself in has literally been destroyed. The gun, for some reason, was given back to Courtney and has been melted down. Kurt was cremated. So all the pieces of physical evidence that you could go and try to rebuild the events of what happened that day have literally been destroyed, which once again, if you look at in terms of events happening around this case, seems suspicious. But ultimately, what I'm left with is a private investigator hired by a person, seemingly manipulated by that person, able to get another employee of that person to share with him privileged and confidential information that, quite honestly, a lawyer shouldn't be sharing if they're a good lawyer, but they seem to be trying to do what appears to be right and true for their beliefs. And that's kind of where this thing just gets stuck. It gets stuck in a bunch of beliefs of personal experience from this private investigator that are very well documented, and this lacking evidence from the Seattle Police Department that might be well documented, but we really don't have access to. So in any case, I know we lost a great artist. This also created a ripple of copycat suicides, over 60 that have been attributed directly to kids recreating Kurt's demise, or leaving quotes from Nirvana songs as they've committed suicide. It's been tragic for years and decades. It will continue to be so, and I have to say, honestly, after looking at this case and reviewing all the information, I will not look at Courtney Love the same way again. I probably won't enjoy, I think, the one song that I liked by her band. If nothing else, she did not do anything to truly help Kurt in this situation. For all the fear that she was trying to throw around him potentially harming himself, she didn't seem to be taking the right steps to actually affect change in that, including the biggest of which, she could have flown home. It would have been that simple. And her reason for that was that she was too busy because she was in LA. So this is where I turn it over to you, brain scratchers. And like I said, this is a huge case. I know that I didn't cover all the nuances, and there might be additional pieces of the story that you want to bring up. Please do so in the comment box below. If we hit a part of the story that is meaty enough, we can always do a follow-up episode. But I'm really looking forward to your feedback on this, and asking that we keep it to things that we can prove. Please include links if you can, and let's be respectful of each other's opinion on this. This is a very personal thing for a lot of people, so I know that people could be very emotional when talking about this case, but I know you guys do great in terms of respecting each other in that comment thread, and I appreciate the heck out of you for doing that. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for spending all this time with me looking into the curse, man, it does feel like a curse, the case of Kurt Cobain. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you next time.